Prime Minister Scott Morrison today welcomed 28 new Liberal and National MPs to Canberra. Newly elected just over a week ago now, and he promised today, like he did on election night, to govern for all Australians.
As I said just before the election, we must burn for the Australian people every single day that we have this privilege of serving them in this parting room and as a government.
Well, there was no specific policy discussion at today's meeting of the Coalition's joint party room, but Mr Morrison reiterated his commitment to delivering a strong economy.
That we focus on ensuring that we're delivering on those commitments that we have made. And those commitments were outlined in that fantastic budget delivered by Josh Frydenberg. Back in the black. To ensure that we focus on the strength of our economy.
The new 46th Parliament is expected to open in the first week of July, and joining me tonight as the government gets back to work is the new Assistant Minister to the Prime Minister, and someone my viewers will know from previous discussions on the issue of electoral reform, which is a passion of his, and that's the member for the WA seat of Tangney, Mr Ben Morton. Ben, great to have you on the show, and congratulations for your move now to the front bench. You are the Parliamentary Secretary, or Assistant Minister it's called now, to the Prime Minister, which gives you no real portfolio, but every portfolio. You have quite a wide roving brief. What's the PM's priorities for you?
Well, look, Peter, it's great to be with you again. It's good to be with you after the election where the Australian people voted a minority government back in to hold a majority. That's a very important point. But the most important point is that we're back to work. Why? Because it's not about us. It's not about the government. It's not about whether or not I've moved from being a backbench member of Parliament to being an assistant minister. This is actually about the Australian people. And so our first priority is to make good on our mandate. And our mandate is all about delivering those tax cuts that will put money back in the pockets of hard-working Australians. That will be our very first priority. And it seems the Labor Party is already playing politics with this very issue. They're disrespecting the mandate that's been given to this government that's been re-elected with a majority.
Well, Ben Morton, before you went into politics, you were a State Director in WA and you were renowned for your political acumen. When you were on the road, on the campaign plane for those 5 weeks with the Prime Minister, at what point did you realise that Labor's policies were something that was galvanising a whole lot of disparate groups in the community to vote Labor out or to not allow Labor in? And when did you think that your messages were resonating with people that you thought you might have been in with a chance?
Well, what's really important here, and the Prime Minister said this before, is that we're a government for the quiet Australians. And the problem with the Labor Party, Peter, is they were listening to the very loud Australians. They were listening to those activists. They were listening to people here in the political bubble in Canberra. And what Scott Morrison has done is that he's listened past all of that to those quiet Australians, those Australians that want to work hard, earn a living, make a better life for their families. And they saw that Scott Morrison as a Prime Minister was connecting with them, with their concerns, but importantly, their aspirations. This was a really important election, and not for the Labor Party, not for the Liberal Party, but for the Australian people, because it was a choice between a government that will back them to be the champion that they want to be, as opposed to a Labor Party that wanted to go down the path of taking as much money as they can out of the pockets of workers and then bill short and deciding how to spend that. And the Australian people rejected that. So, look, we're very happy to be re-elected, but what today's about is about getting back to work. I think people want to see less political conflict from those noisy Australian activists and more hard work done on behalf of those quiet Australians.
Well, we saw today Anthony Albanese is up in Queensland. He's on what's called in politics a listening tour. That's when you're out with real people trying to take your medicine after being walloped around the ears. It happens all the time. People have heard that before. We looked at him today, however, and his position on Adani was still the same position that Labor had, that they muddled all the way through in the campaign. Ben Morton, do you think the Queenslanders are going to take kindly to a Labor leader, different one, sure, but still running the same line and certainly not hearing the messages from the people of Queensland?
Well, only the Labor Party can go on a listening tour wearing earmuffs. And that's exactly what they're doing. They should listen to the Australian people. The Australian people have just voted at the ballot box, and they've voted for a government that's going to put more money in their pockets by returning their tax to them. Anthony Albanese is not backing our tax plan, that we have a mandate for the Australian people. And if he was listening, he would do that. He's not listening on a variety of issues. He wants to give the impression that they are, but they are certainly not. And my advice to Anthony Albanese is that you don't need to do a listening tour or pretend to do one. The voices of the quiet Australians have been heard quite clearly. And now's the time to allow this government, this re-elected government, to get on and implement those policies we took to the election.
You talked about tax there a moment ago. Are you hopeful you can get the tax package through?
Well, look, it's incumbent on the Senate. Obviously, we'll get through the House with ease now that we've been re-elected as a majority government. But you know, this was central to our re-election campaign. It was a central theme to the election campaign, and this is a real test of the Labor Party if they're going to respect not the Liberal Party, not Scott Morrison, but the will of the Australian people. And if they can't do that after an election campaign, well, then they just haven't learnt the lessons that they need to. This is a very arrogant Labor Party who are fundamentally against individuals making decisions in their own best interests, in the best interests of their family. And they fundamentally believe that we should be taxing people more, and that the big government here in Canberra with the bureaucrats you talk about should be making more and more decisions about individuals' lives. And that's not something that I believe in or this government does.
Just on the issue of electoral reform, you and I have talked about it many times before. We saw a very activist organisation Get Up who moved not just in 1 or 2 seats but quite comprehensively across the board in all states and territories. There have been a lot of calls for Get Up to be treated as an associated entity, for the AEC, the Commission, the Electoral Commission, to have another look at them. A lot of people are concerned about the level of disclosure or lack of disclosure. Will this be something that the government will pursue and not, I have to say, Ben, leave it so that it appears in report after report after report, but you get so close to the next election that nothing actually changes? Is it going to be something that you're going to move on quickly?
Well, look, as we discussed last time, Peter, we actually legislated in the last parliament to make sure that Get Up has the same disclosure requirements as a political party. That was a significant achievement in the last parliament. What we'll look at very closely is their compliance after this election campaign. But what I've said about Get Up is that they're like a wolf in sheep's clothing. I said that before the election, but I think what happened in this election campaign is the wolf took off the pretence of the sheep. And we saw exactly what Get Up is. Get Up is a rabid activist organisation that, quite frankly, couldn't no longer pretend to be independent like they hoped to, and everyone saw what they are, and that's why I think you'll find this organisation, Get Up, will be in a steep decline as a result of people now finally seeing exactly who and what they are.
Right, well, what's your first priority in your new role as I said, Assistant Minister to the Prime Minister, Ben?
Well, look, my role is to assist the Prime Minister in any way that he requires of me. I'm looking forward to being sworn in tomorrow with my family. I'm very proud personally of being able to be in a position to do so. What we need to do is to make sure that this government gets back to work. That's what's happening here in Canberra. The Labor Party is being inward-looking. This is not about me as an individual. This is not about individuals within our government. This is about putting in place, probably turning down the volume on politics and turning up, delivering what those quiet Australians want. And that is a government that has less roadblocks or blockages in bureaucracy, and one that delivers on their concerns.
Oh, Ben Morton, thanks very much for your time. All the very best. Good luck tomorrow, and I hope your family enjoyed it as much as you do. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Peter.